As you guys already know, there are many claw grip mice out there. For smaller to medium sized hands, the X2 Mini is really amazing for aggressive claw grip if you like flat sides. The Hardiest Plus is one of the very best claw grip mice out there that is suitable for many different kinds of grips. The Ninjutsu Sora is also a mouse that most of you guys know that is an amazing claw grip mouse with that back hump. But for whatever reason, the OP1 is just being completely slept on. So in this video, I'll make sure that you guys all wake up. Now, I'm actually borrowing this mouse from a friend of mine that lives near me. He modded the mouse, switched out these switches, took out the battery, and basically made it wired only. So instead of the stock 58.5 grams, this mouse currently weighs around 50 grams. But getting into the boring stuff, I sadly can't speak of the unboxing experience because I don't have the original box or anything like that. The original weight without any modding is 58.5 grams. And for the QC, man, this thing is just rock fucking solid. I really do think that Endgame gear make the most solid mice on the market right now. Now, in terms of shape, from the side profile you can see that it is very much a claw grip focused hump. It is not too far in the rear, so it can be a bit awkward for some aggressive claws, but for more of a relaxed claw grip, this is like one of the best shapes that you could ever wish for. When you watch the mouse from beneath, you can see that the mouse is incredibly narrow in the front, and this becomes very obvious when you compare it to something like the X2 Mini, which is already a pretty tiny mouse. The OP1we really just looks incredibly slim in the front, but when actually using it in-game, I never got any kinds of fatigue or issues with it being too slim. Now, I've actually mained the Viper Mini before, and when I did main it, I had to put on these really thick lizard skin grips on the right side because my hand would actually cramp because of the mouse being so narrow in the front, but when using the OP1, I don't have that issue whatsoever. Now, other than that, in terms of size, it is definitely a small mouse. I'd say that it is ever so slightly longer than the X2 Mini in hand, and that this is the closest comparison that you could possibly do. Looking at these two mice from the side, they really do look very similar, but you can notice that the hump on the OP1 is slightly lower and also a bit more towards the center, and that is what you feel in hand as well. Whilst the X2 Mini has this small hump in the back that is really nice for aggressive claw, it is very difficult to relax claw the X2 Mini because it is a very short mouse. So I have 19 by 10 centimeter hands, and I cannot relax claw the X2 Mini simply because it is too short for me. But the OP1, however, is a completely different story. Since it does have that extra length, I could definitely relax claw this, and the hump in the back feels incredibly comfortable. And also, it only fills out that bottom part of my hand so that I don't accidentally push into a palm grip at some point. But since I do play aggressive claw, I did have to get used to it a bit more at the beginning to force myself into that aggressive claw position so that I only contact the mouse with the bottom part of my palm down here. And as soon as I got used to this grip, which really only took a few minutes, I really enjoyed playing with the mouse. Mainly because it is really unique and not something that I've tried before. Another mouse that this shape kind of reminded me of was the Ninjutsu Sora, since it sort of has a similar hump. But since the OP1 is a lot smaller in hand, it is way less restrictive and doesn't really support the hole underneath of your hand like the Ninjutsu Sora does. But the way that the hump gradually shifts upwards towards the center is something that does remind me of the OP1. So if you have a Ninjutsu Sora and really wanted it to be less restrictive and smaller, the OP1 is definitely something for you. So again, if you do already own a mouse that has an aggressive claw hump in the back and you find it a bit too aggressive and want it a bit more towards the center, the OP1 is definitely something for you. Now, in terms of coating, this thing is freaking awesome. As soon as your hand just starts getting a slightly bit warm, the mouse just freaking sticks to your hand. The only downside that it has is it does get a bit dirty, but for me personally, I simply prefer having a very grippy coating over anything else. So I do think that they made the perfect choice. In terms of mouse switches, they actually use the Kale Go optical switches for the main buttons. Going off the input from my reviewer friends and also what others said online, many people find this switch a bit too heavy, but if you want a lighter switch, you can head over to the Endgame Gear webpage and get a switch pack for 10 euros. That is a ready-to-go set with lighter switches to instantly swap out inside of the mouse. They also provide the screwdriver for it and everything, so I think for 10 euros, it is a perfect way to get those lighter clicks that you might want. I personally don't have an issue with slightly heavier clicks because I much prefer having a mouse that doesn't double click instead of having switches that are too light. In terms of pre-travel, there's basically none. There is some post-travel, but it feels absolutely perfect in game. The side buttons are also nice and tactile, and there's no horrible pre or post travel. The scroll is nice and tactile, not too heavy, not too light, very nice, and so is the mouse free. In terms of these stock skates, I sadly can't give you any input because I don't have these stock skates on here. My friend actually installed these Tiger Arc ones because it's his favorite type of skate. But as you can see on this picture, these skates actually have cutouts for the screws so that you can easily unscrew the mouse and install those LiDAR switches that they offer for 10 euros. And I just simply find that fucking awesome. So huge props to Endgame Gear for doing this for our enthusiast community. In terms of battery life, I sadly also can't give you any input because my friend simply took that bitch out. But as stated by Endgame Gear, it supposedly lasts you 7 days, especially since this is a 1K only mouse. Speaking of 1K, no, this mouse does not support 4K or high polling rate or anything like that, because Endgame Gear is simply too based for that. And I also do think that having a perfect 1K support is simply superior to offering 4K at a higher price. And speaking of the pricing, this is actually one of the very strong points of the OP1we. So as of today, since it's currently the Black Friday week, you can get the OP1we for as little as 69 euros. But I do think that the pricing is absolutely amazing, especially currently with this Black Friday deal going on. But even for 85 euros and readily available, I do think that this mouse is certainly worth its price point, especially considering it being a very solid and high quality mouse with one of the best QC that you could possibly get, including the absolutely insane coding that Endgame Gear offers. Speaking of what Endgame Gear offers, they do offer these grips as well. They do also offer the mentioned LiDAR switches that you can get. In terms of skates, they also offer the skate pack that is available in either 100% PTFE or 99.5%. With this pack, you can choose between having either this full skate in the back or these skates that have less surface area both in the front and in the back to get a faster skate experience. And both versions actually have cutouts for the screws so that you can easily switch to that switch pack without having to ruin your mouse skates. The last mouse that I can actually recall having accessible screws is probably the Viper Mini, and that was released almost 3 years ago. Now, getting into the software, by default the mouse is actually set to 3 milliseconds. I simply always set it to 2 milliseconds because I never have any issues with that. As already mentioned, the mouse only goes up to 1 kHz, and honestly, that's already about it. The mouse is incredibly plug and play, and it really shows. Now, when it comes to my personal opinion about the mouse, I really do think that it is incredibly underrated. I don't know why it went so badly under the radar. I do think part of it is because the community really hypes 4K for whatever reason, but being a sub 60 gram monster, I can certainly recommend you checking it out if you really want a unique claw grip shape that you haven't tried before. Or if you're still looking for that perfect claw grip mouse and you've tried something like the HDS Plus already, I really do see this being a viable option. The mouse being so narrow in the front actually made me feel incredibly comfortable with my aim. And since it is so narrow, your fingers are very close to the sensor, so I could see this mouse being something that Rocket Jump Ninja would really enjoy, because this really does follow his formula. It is sort of a boring mouse, but if you're looking for that perfect plug and play experience without any bullshit, this mouse is for you. Now, to the conclusion, who is this mouse for? For anybody with small to medium sized hands who plays a relaxed claw grip, I could definitely see this being one of the very best shapes out there. I wouldn't recommend it for any hands larger than 19 by 10, especially if you play that relaxed claw, since you do get near the end of the mouse pretty quickly. But yeah, especially for smaller to medium sized hands, this is an awesome shape. I can definitely recommend it for aggressive claw too. It just takes a slightly bit of getting used to, and I do think that there are some shapes out there that are more suitable for aggressive claw, especially for a bit larger hands. But if you have a smaller hand or up to my size with aggressive claw, I can't see you having any issues with this shape at all, and I still just do think that this mouse is very slept on. One thing that I could also recommend is actually using this for a fingertip grip. Because these sides on the mouse are pretty darn flat, you have this very blank canvas to be able to put your fingers wherever you'd like to. And honestly, I'd rather have this thing over the X2 Mini any day of the week, especially with the wonky QC that Pulsar mice can have. I'd much rather have a plug and play mouse that is 100% solid right out the box. Now, if you do play a palm grip, you can actually get your palm into that hump as well. It is pretty awkward though, but so is that grip style. I think at the price point, you can't really really do anything wrong with getting it, mainly because you were promised a 100% solid product with one of the best coatings out there, and honestly I don't know what more to say. Of course I do have this modded version that is down to 50 grams, but I did have to use a wire with it, so I can imagine the 58 grams being a noticeable difference, but I wouldn't call it a deal breaker whatsoever, especially since I have mice around 60 grams at a similar size that I use often. Now that's about it for this video. Remember to subscribe and hit the bell to get notified for any upcoming reviews, but other than that, I'm out.
Not gonna lie with you, twin, I haven't cleaned my booty in probably 40 days. It's nasty as fuck though. I do not be cleaning my booty. I should have put that on a song. I go platinum. What the fuck? Was that a ghost? That smell like shit.